everyone, and welcome to the Sacred Rainbow Warrior. Today I'm talking about devil worship, and I'm going to break down what is devil worship, what 666 actually means, not the nonsense that's on the internet, how I beat the devil, what self-worship actually is, and what's really interesting, I'm going to go into animal wisdom, how they use the dragon, the goat, and the stag as representations of satanic cult and devil worship against us. So let's dive on in. So, what is devil worship? Essentially, devil worship is the opposite of life. It's the destruction of love. It's the worship of lies, and it's ego worship. And what it originates from is how the war started. So when I talk about the war, I mean the original war, the reason why we're in this mess. And the reason it started is when God created himself, he also created his opposite, right? And so there are other, let's say, other beings in other parts of the universe or another part of wherever, different dimensions that actually find love painful, right? And you can see how that's been emanated through akashic wounding and karmic ties through humanity, and how when somebody speaks to love, when truth is love, it actually hurts because of the toxic shame avoidance, excuse me, which hides in the heart. And so these entities can't physically control us, and so there's this energy of manipulation. This is why I'm going to talk about animal wisdom. This is an energy of enslavement, imprisonment, and it's all self-enslavement, self-imprisonment, because it's about how we make those choices. And as I said, devil worship is about worshipping lies, falling for lies, buying those lies instead of truth, which is love. And so devil worship, if you that's why my podcast is called He Lives, because it's a spell on the devil card. And the devil card in the tarot is a goat, right? And I'm going to talk it more into that. But if you spell devil backwards, it's lived. So it's actually an attack on the divine masculine to keep him in the ground, so to speak. And so mine is called He Lives. And I base it around the lion, because the lion can't be enslaved, because his love is just so big. And the lion is like a not just a totem, but it's an avatar, it's a representation of the divine masculine. And you can see how devil worship plays out. Most people think it's like this cult worship that you see in movies and stuff, but it's not. Most people don't even realize that they're actually worshiping the devil themselves, because when you're part of society, for example, if you're part of watching the news or buying chocolate that has sugar in it, you're purchasing enslavement. That's a kind of devil worship, and you see all these concerts now that have devil worship in them, and you see it in so many different programs. If you witness, if you grew up in the 80s or 90s, whatever, you see that there's less and less and less kind-hearted movies and more violent movies. There's more moved towards violent realism, which actually isn't realistic. And this like kind of pulling the wool over everybody's eyes, again, lies. And it all originates from all the choices as humanity have made, what the choices our ancestors have made, and it kind of it's a choice with us now in this time, in this incredible time of ascension, where those lies can stop with us now. It's like saying, hey, no, no more lies, and take responsibility for your ancestral line, which is what I've been doing, the purification of your blood. And it's not just about your bloodline, it's akashic as well. And I'm making this video, I've done another video as well on religious trauma syndrome. I'm making these videos because this stuff's real and people go through it. When I started my medicine journey with my partner back in 2020, we opened up some really incredible portals, because we weren't lovers then, we were best friends. But because we had came together, because we had met, we didn't even know we were twin flames. But because we met, it caused a lot of disturbance in the darkness, let's say, and we got attacked many times, and so I had to learn how to do exorcisms and remove that energy. And it's very difficult if you misunderstand what all of that means. Really, what it meant for me was that I was going in the wrong direction. That if I could give you one incredible tip, is that if you're seeing that kind of stuff, you're going in the wrong direction. And what does that mean by going in the wrong direction? It means going into your mind, going into fear. Because if you look at it like if you look at the body as like an elevator between the divine and fear. The divine is always within the heart, within the soul. And if we become afraid, we go into the mind and we start creating those images. And I'm not saying they're not real, but we do create it. We are that powerful. We create it through our choices. So, for example, if I asked you a question, is your future bright or is it not so bright? And if you choose bright, then you create that choice, you create that image, you create that energy. But if you choose the other one, you create something negative, and that can create attachments. And so this is all linked to devil worship. It's very intricate, and it is actually is very interesting when you can come out the other side. And I come out the other side of all of that, and I can see how I made those choices and how difficult it was for me to get out the other side. You know, it took me down a really dark route, not consciously, but unconsciously. I was misleading myself by following this thirst, this never-ending hunger for knowledge, instead of completely surrendering to what life or what spirit or what my ancestors, what my soul wanted, desired for me, wished for me. And there's so many different kinds of devil worship, and I'll go into that more when I speak about the goat, but it is very much linked to enslavement. And I'm sure you've probably heard how some people have called this planet a prison planet. And for many years, I used to say, oh, that's rubbish. But it's not the case now. We're free, but there are some people who are still enslaved. And so there was some truth to that, a bit like in the film Matrix, how everybody's in those enslavement pods. But the truth is a lot, it's a lot darker than that. And I had to witness that, and it actually made me vomit a bit like in the movie. And the the interesting thing is that we don't have to pay attention to those lies. That's one of the antidotes of devil worship. It's to elevate through joy and to keep choosing for joy. Because if you keep entertaining the ego, which essentially is fear, then you're doing the opposite of love. So always do the opposite of fear and go the opposite way. Now, I want to talk about now the beast of love, the 666. There's so much stuff online, written scripts and stuff like this, and from the Bible and stuff. But I've learned through my own experience, instead of reading what's online, I've learned through my own experience what it is. And like with everything, they turn everything back to front, upside down, inside out, like they did with the devil lived and lives. And I mean, they even tried to turn animals against us, like I said, the goat and stag and dragon. And so 666 actually is a divine number, and it's actually the beast, not the beast as in the devil, but the beast of love. Like I say, they use the devil to either dehumanize the feminine or dehumanize the masculine. And if you take the numbers from for example, the Thoth Tarot deck, six is the lovers. Six plus six is 12. 12 is the hanged man. So that's a very masculine, that's bat energy, and that's about redemption. And then 12 plus 6 is 18, which is the moon, which is the feminine. So you add all three of those together and you get divine union, you get the beast of love. So that's why they call it the beast, because again, if I go back to what is devil worship, it's the fear of love. And so they tainted, especially the church, they tainted the wisdom of love. So that's really profound, and I'm glad I can share that with you, because 666 isn't a sign of evil, it's a sign of love. but it's been used for satanic rituals and for that reason because everything can be manipulated, but only through choice because the beast isn't a monster. It's a raw primal energy of love that's been unshackled from shame and control. It's actually peace. It's actually the peace of peace, the end of war between the masculine and feminine within. That's what divine union is, and that's what the beast of love represents. Because true love begins with the self and unconditional love, and you can't love anyone unless you find that redemption within. And that's why it's so powerful, and that's why they've been trying to stop it. But because the times have changed and done so much work in ending all of that dogma, it's too late. The beast of love is here, I'm afraid. So that's really good news. Now I want to talk about number two or number three, whatever, how many I've done so far, is how to beat um, the devil. And this was so challenging for me, but I'm going to say and just going to come out with it outright first and then talk about it first. But I beat the devil by turning the sword on myself. Now, what is the sword? The sword is many things. It's a representation of the warrior. It can also be a representation of the phallus, but for me, it's a representation of truth and alignment. It's straight and it's cutting. It can cut away, but if misused, it can be very dangerous, and it can be about cutting people down, for example, in a spiritual metaphorical sense. So, how did I beat the devil? And so instead of hurting other people, I took responsibility for everything. So, for example, if I had judgments on the feminine, which I did, like I was a toxic man, and I had to admit that, I had to confess that, I had to take responsibility for that because I had to learn what it meant to be a toxic man, so I could unlearn it. And all of these choices are what took me into devil worship unconsciously, buying the lies, buying the addictions, buying the abuse. And so by turning the sword on myself, I turned truth upon myself. So instead of hurting others, I realized that I was just hurting myself. So if I had a judgment on someone that they were ugly, how how ugly am I? What ugliness am I seeing within myself? If, for example, I had judgments against someone in the public, I would mirror that judgment against myself. And for example, if I had a really bad day and I wanted to say something horrible to my partner, I would keep it contained, and that anger would build up in me, which meant I was turning the sword on myself, which hurt. And so when I received that pain, I could go, oh, well, I'm glad I didn't give that energy to someone else because that would have hurt them. And when we do hurt someone else, it comes back even harder. And so I talk about this in my integration coaching and my soul coaching that I offer online is when when you have that stuckness, that anger or that sadness or depression, there are different techniques that you can move that energy through. So when I turn the sword on myself, it doesn't hurt when it's truth. It actually cuts away the ego. It's when I lie to myself that it hurts because that is devil worship. And so it's about learning what the truth is. And we're in the year of the wood snake now, and the snake is about lies and truth. So there's a lot of lies being exposed in the collective, but also a lot of truth. Like the pyramids have just been exposed. I mean, I think that's pretty common sense that that was going to happen, but apparently to a lot of people it's not because they've been hiding their head in the sand and not accepting the truth. And again, that's devil worship. Buying the lies of all the brainwashing about us, evolving from apes and stuff like that. All that nonsense. So the sword does symbolize truth, and it also symbolizes sacrifice and cutting away illusions, ego addiction, and false entities. And it's a masculine energy, but a feminine also has that within her. And but it is a masculine gift because the masculine is very straightforward, and the feminine is very round, like the earth goes around the sun, and the masculine is very much like the beams of sunlight that come from the sun, very, very straight. And the the most fantastic way that I came to that I came to understand how to turn a sword on myself is I actually came to this point in my medicine journey where every time I got really close to a breakthrough, there was always this shadow opposite me, and I had to channel spirit to understand what it was, and he said it's me. And so I had created this devil within me that was my shadow, and it wanted me to give up. It wanted me to fall for the lies that I wasn't good enough, that I wasn't worthy, all these judgments about myself. And so all I had to do, and I make it sound easy, but it wasn't. I had to stand. I had to stand for myself. I had to stand and fight. And that's what a warrior does. He fights for love. It's not about the physicality of fighting. It's about standing by love and protecting the feminine. And when I mean protecting the feminine, I don't mean from outside um, you know, outside attacks, for example. For the masculine, it's about protecting the feminine from himself, and that's something that I know all men struggle with, and it's very challenging. And this is what I mean about turning the sword on yourself. And it takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of responsibility. It's not easy. It's definitely a journey. It's not something you just switch on and do overnight. But that's how you clean the sword by doing that, because the sword is also a representation of the past. There's so many metaphysical realities that coincide with what the sword really symbolizes. The sword and the stone. Arthur actually means stone, right? So the sword, he was the sword. He was the sword in his stone, and this is something I had to embody through my journey as well. Now, I will go into this in more detail, the antidote to devil worship. You can see it in my video, actually. I filmed myself in ceremony on Prophecy Walkers, which is my joint channel with my partner. The antidote to devil worship is actually self-worship, and that's not narcissistic. Narcissism is toxic shame avoidance. Narcissists do not love themselves. They do not really. They love their egos. There's a big difference. So, self-worship is such a beautiful way to honor yourself, honor your soul. And the way I see self-worship is the showing love to your inner child, showing love to yourself and your soul. And there's so many things that means. What does that mean to show love? What does that mean to show your self-worship? Well, it means being kind to yourself when you make a mistake instead of like losing your temper, because losing your temper is like hurting yourself. It can be being kind to yourself. It can also mean being kind to others. It can mean reliving childhood memories. It can mean looking after yourself physically. All of these things are like self-worship and self-love. And it's the way I did it is I created, again, you can see it in the video, but I created an altar for my inner child, and I put candles and stones around it, and I tried to speak to him every day. And it's it's a great act of reverence to your higher self, your deep self, your soul, and it really helps bring out the gifts of your soul. I mean, it's really quite advanced actually to do that. So if you started doing that from the beginning of your journey, it would really take you in quantum leaps towards embodying your innate self. Healing all of the wounds that your inner child have had to deal with over the times. And it's a very multi-dimensional healing because as you grow up, you embody different parts of yourself. But there's always, I find, a part of yourself that is stronger than most parts of yourself, and that's normally the higher self, the one that's stuck by your side the whole time and has been guiding you. Because parts of you come and go depending on what's happening in your life. Like if you experience abuse, some parts come in to protect you and some leave because they need to be protected from that energy. And that's definitely what happened to me. And What happens in the I'll go into this more when I talk about the dragon, but what happens when you start worshipping the self and giving yourself love is it's absolutely magical. So I'll go on to that now. So the dragon, right? So the dragon, the red dragon, you often see that the Satan or the devil is red with horns. That's the dragon. So the dragon has been used against people as a form of control, enslavement, and manipulation. And the dragon actually, the red dragon actually symbolizes sensuality. And again, I speak about this in my video about why men sexualize women because sensuality is very powerful and it's seen as feminine, but it's not. It's just been misunderstood and lost. You look at cats, the way they move, they're very sensual, male cats. They behave in the same way, but they're feline, feminine line, right? So there's a very similar thing with devil worship against the dragon, right? Dragons are called monsters, but if you've ever felt the energy of a dragon, it's an enormous amount of love. And again, like I said at the beginning, if devil worship is the fear of love, then there's that fear of dragons. So if, for example, like in Lord of the Rings, you saw this big dragon, you'd be like, "Oh, it's going to kill me, run." But the truth is, if you saw a dragon in real life and your heart was open, you'd be able to receive it. It's just like horses. Horses that have a terrifying amount of love. They have such big hearts, they're huge. And if you have that capability of keeping your heart open, and you put your hand on the heart of a horse, and you're able to receive that, it can be quite terrifying because it's that level of love. Now imagine that as the size of a dragon, and this is why they used against us because of their power. They used the power of our ancestors for enslavement and the magic of dragons and other animals against us. So when we turn devil worship into self worship, we're reclaiming our senses. We're coming back to our senses, the senses of humanity, reclaiming our humanity, because dogma is the hatred of your own humanity. It's like this disgust of humanity, if you think about it. Because if you're truly human, you wouldn't treat animals or people in that way. The abuse that happens is beyond. And another thing about devil worship is it externalizes everything. And when I talk about the antidote, turning the sword on yourself and self-worship, it's about internalizing and transmuting it, taking responsibility for it and transmuting everything into wisdom. This is why I'm a specialist of integration because I had to be. I had to learn all the ins and outs. I had to make all the mistakes so that I could learn the utmost advanced, accurate forms of integration in order to ascend to the highest and purest level. Because that's what I've been devoted from first day. I don't know why, I just am. And it's to do with the lion. The lion is about devotion, and like I said, the lion can't be enslaved. Yeah, he can be caged, and I went through that. I had to uncage myself. And there's this whole kind of Stockholm syndrome of coming out the cage. Is it safe? Is it safe? And you see that in women who've been abused, physically abused in relationships. They always go back to their abuser. That's Stockholm syndrome. So this is all related to what I'm talking about. Now, I want to talk about the goat. The goat is really fascinating because the goat is a representation of Dionysus, and Dionysus is about ecstasy. But also, they say is about madness. But if you understand the energy of the spirit animal of the goat, and again, this was used in the devil card for its power. The goat is actually a wizard, a divine wizard, and the goat is in its. So they have special gifts. I have, and I speak about this in my animal wisdom videos. That when I went on my medicine journey, I went really to the highest dimensions to ask the universe, ask spirit, what is the highest meaning, the purest meaning of each animal, not just the stuff that you read on the internet or in the tarot decks. And so I get these incredible words that I would have to then translate. So, for example, the word I got for the goat was fun, and I had to feel more deeply into that. And it's divine. It's actually divine ecstasy. And divine ecstasy is what Dionysus used to do, right? But if there's any kind of devil worship, it can lead to madness or insanity, and that's the shadow. That's the shadow. There's this addiction to devil worship and abuse. Like in if you there's a book called Ecstasy about Dionysus and the goat, and it talks about how Dionysus was a god of wine and vines. But back then, people don't just knock back wine, they have a small amount of it. It's the same with alcohol. We just knock it back now, but it's actually a medicine. But if you abuse medicine, especially powerful medicines, then they punish you in a way. And so if you got drunk on wine or alcohol, it even says it in the book, it opens you up to demonic entities. And this is what it is. It's about reverence to medicine, but there's an addiction that needs to be broken. And what is addiction? And this is really interesting because the shadow of the goat is manipulation. And I've got this written down. I have so many here. Goat manipulation, right? And one of the gifts is catharsis, and catharsis is a form of purification through acknowledgement and responsibility, which is again really powerful. And all of that leads to divine ecstasy. And divine ecstasy is incredible. It's divine ecstasy is when you laugh so much that you pee your pants and you have an ego death. I've done it so many times. I actually did it on my partner as well. It's brilliant. It's so much fun. And I talk about this. The gifts of spirit animals is just so divine. It's so much fun, right? So in some books you'll read that Dionysus represents divine intoxication, right? And again, this is how somebody who's divine and represented this divine masculine was punished and distorted because they wanted to trample on the name of anyone that was in support or worship of the divine feminine. And that's definitely something Dionysus was good at. And the in our current day, alcohol isn't used as medicine really. It's used as a crutch and to drown our sorrows, but actually just creates more sorrow. And when you when you understand the energy of divine ecstasy, it's actually easier for a man to work with because it's a higher energy because the feminine is naturally deeper. And so I've spoke about this before about spiritual suicide, ego death, that if the ego when the ego kicks up a fuss and we don't know how to die spiritually, how to destroy the ego, it can actually manipulate you and make you believe that through suicidal thoughts that you need a physical death, that you want to take your own life, but that's the lie. And so through integration, different forms of integration, which what I specialize in, and reach out if you want to work with me on my website, is you can create the ego death and move into divine ecstasy. Now, the problem that women have with this is this is why I say that when men go into the darkness, it leads to suicide. And when women go into the light and they're not ready to go that fast because they move slower than the masculine and vice versa in the deep, is that when women go up, it leads to insanity. And that's why a lot of women end up in mental institutions compared to men who kill themselves. And it's all a lie, and it can easily be fixed through translation of what that energy is actually trying to tell them. But because of these entities of lies of devil worship, they convince us that we're either losing our mind through fear or that we're unworthy and that we should end our lives. And so this is really powerful video, really powerful wisdom which I use to actually prevent my partner from going mad and prevent myself from killing myself on numerous occasions. Because, like I said, I had to learn the hard way of how to exorcise those demons out. So the third animal, and perhaps the last animal that I'll bring into this conversation, which I find the most difficult to deal with when it came to devil worship is the stag. And the stag in its purity is a representation of Pan, and Pan is the name of the god of nature, faun, half man, half stag. And Pan is a representation of man's true nature. And when the Garden of Eden was first created, it wasn't Adam and Eve, it was Pan and Lilith. So we were lied to there. We were lied to there. And there's a hidden story there, which I'll be writing about. And so what they did to Pan and Lilith was, could be considered unforgivable and actually atrocious. And so what they did to the stag, because the stag represents divine leadership, they turned that into misleadership, so misleading. And what was the other one? Stagnation and ignorance. Now, if you've ever read any books, I read this book by called Through the Eyes of Love, the nature of our true nature, Pan. This guy, I speak about him a lot. He passed away actually last year. I was going to have him on my podcast, and Michael, and he wrote some incredible books where he was guided and channeled Pan. And I remember it really hit me like really woke me up when he said the greatest sin of man is ignorance. And I speak about this so much that the stag, these jokes that people tell about the stag. What do you call a deer with no eyes? No idea. What do you call a deer with no eyes and no legs? Still no idea. And it's about because the stag is about the warrior. It's about the representation. It's about standing and turning towards love. But they manipulated that as a derogatory attack against Pan and the divine nature of humanity, of the masculine and of the feminine through Lilith, right? And so, because she was a representation of the deer as well, and they attacked the gentleness of the feminine through the masculine, by misleading them, and misleadership can lead to so much disgusting distortions, and so it's a really really toxic diversion from love because when a stag doesn't stand, it stays on the floor. And if it's raining in the forest, that turns into mud. And when it stands, it can't. It becomes a stick in the mud, and this is stagnation becomes stagnant. And when something becomes stagnant, it starts to rot, and eventually it starts to die. And this can lead to again suicidal thoughts because when you're not moving your life ahead, you are essentially dying, and that can lead to really horrible self thoughts. And I had to go through this. And there's actually if you Google Wendigo, there's two types of Wendigo. There's a dark Wendigo and a light Wendigo. And the Wendigo, the dark Wendigo, is a stag when they use it in devil worship with the horns, and they put a skull over their face, and that's actually used in sacrificing children and the blood of innocence. It's extremely dark, and it has actually created a spell of ignorance over humanity. That's how they did it. They used it through sacrificing blood, and this goes back through generations. But yeah, it still happens in current society, and I'm sure you're aware of that. So there's that Wendigo. But remember, dark magic can be pure as well in its depth and its deep. But this is through the representation of the feminine, and this takes an enormous amount of purification. But there is a light Wendigo, and if you're a fan of comics, Marvel comics, there was always the Incredible Hulk. He had this enemy. It was the only enemy that could ever go toe to toe with him, and it was called the Wendigo. And it was actually this white beast, and it's actually yeah, it's this white beast that is actually a fighter for love, and that's all I can say on that. I think that one's a bit top secret, so I won't go into too much detail on that. But there is a light Wendigo, and it's extremely powerful, extremely powerful. But the stag is about pride and divine leadership, and it's really about being in contact with the divine as well, the antlers. And when you come into pride, again, I'm talking about antidotes to devil worship. So I'll talk about I'll just do a quick recap on the three animals. So antidotes, sensuality, coming back to your senses. So smelling flowers, listening to birds, these kind of things that we take for granted. Taste, closing your eyes when you eat, sensuality, your movement, how you make love, these kind of things. Sacred sexuality, that's dragon energy. The goat, having fun, taking life with a pinch of salt, removing addictions, and making confessions of catharsis, sharing, like joining a men's group or a women's group and saying, "Oh, I'm going through this, these are my judgments," or doing it opposite with the opposite sex, like I've done. It's very powerful where you hold space in non-judgment. Shamans call that hollow bone. These are all antidotes to devil worship. And the antidote from the stag is self-recognition, having pride in yourself, like saying out loud, I did great today. I accomplished this, I accomplished that. And when you're going to sleep at night, instead of thinking about tomorrow, think about what you've achieved that day. And it really brings about an excitement of like, oh, wow, I've got another day tomorrow. I can achieve even more. And these all help push away the lies and create your own self-recognition and pride of love through divine ecstasy, through sensuality, through devotion. And when you really get it, when you really get that self-worship is actually a pillar of your own life, pillar of love, you can start to understand that it's actually a rebellion against devil worship and control. It's a homecoming to your sovereignty, something that is was taken away with us, but is our birthright. And it's really it's really divine. It's really divine. And I'd really love if you have any questions about any of this, entities, devil worship, um, demons, ghosts, any of that. I've had to go through all of it, and the answers aren't what we read online. They're so they've been the internet's been polluted with people's egoic attachments. I'm not saying it's all false, but I've been through it. I've been through it, and I've had to go through it in order to come out the other end, so I can turn it into wisdom. And if it's not turned into wisdom, it's just knowledge. And knowledge is if you know something but you're not living it. And I chose to live it. And to get through this took a lot of work. So if you wish to work from me, I offer so many different services. Just check out my website, thesacredrainbowwarrior.com. And I welcome any interactions and questions. So thanks for listening. Bye bye.